The scream that pierced through the quiet Colorado morning was so shrill, I nearly dropped my coffee mug on my kitchen floor. I looked out my window to see Brenda Carmichael, president of the Pinewood Heights Homeowners Association, standing in my driveway with her arms crossed and a look of pure rage on her face. Her blonde bob was perfectly styled despite the freezing temperature, and she wore a puffy white jacket that made her look like an angry marshmallow. I opened my front door, letting in a blast of frigid air. We had gotten nearly 2 feet of snow overnight, and the entire neighborhood looked like a winter wonderland. Well, except for Brenda, who looked more like a winter nightmare. "Yuri Thompson, you need to get out here right now," she shouted, pointing up at my roof. I grabbed my jacket and stepped out onto my porch, my boots crunching in the fresh snow. "What's the problem, Brenda?" "The problem?" Her voice went up an octave. "The problem is that your solar panels are completely covered in snow. Do you have any idea how that looks?" This is a violation of HOA Code Section 12.7, which states that all exterior home features must be maintained in an aesthetically pleasing manner at all times. I stared at her for a moment, processing what she had just said. "You want me to climb up on my roof in 20-degree weather to brush snow off my solar panels because they don't look pretty enough for you?" "It's not about what I want," she said, pulling out her phone and scrolling through what I assumed was the HOA rulebook. "It's about maintaining the standards of this community. Besides, those panels are an eyesore even when they're not covered in snow. I voted against allowing them when you submitted your architectural modification request 2 years ago. And you were overruled by the rest of the board," I reminded her. My solar panel installation had been a contentious topic in our HOA meetings, but ultimately the board had approved it. Brenda had been the only dissenting vote. "Well, that was before I became president," she said smugly. "Things are different now. I expect those panels to be cleared by end of business today, or you'll be facing a fine." I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. "Brenda, the snow will melt off on its own in a day or two. The weather forecast says we're getting sunshine starting tomorrow afternoon. That's not good enough." She tapped something on her phone. "I'm documenting this violation right now. You have until 5 p.m. today to remedy the situation." As she stalked off through the snow, I noticed something interesting. The streetlights in our neighborhood were still on, even though it was nearly 9 in the morning. They should have shut off automatically at dawn. I smiled to myself, knowing exactly why they were still burning bright. My solar panel system was not just any residential setup. When I had installed it 2 years ago, I had gone all in with a massive 40-kilowatt system that covered most of my south-facing roof and part of my garage. The installation had cost me nearly $80,000, but it was an investment that had already started paying dividends. The unique part was that I had entered into an agreement with the local power company, Rocky Mountain Electric, to supply excess power back to the grid. Not just the standard net metering that most residential solar customers used, but an actual independent power producer agreement that made me a small-scale utility provider. The neighborhood of Pinewood Heights, located just outside Boulder, Colorado, had been built 15 years ago on what used to be farmland. The developer had cut corners on the electrical infrastructure, installing a transformer that was barely adequate for the 50 homes in our subdivision. 5 years ago, as more people moved in and started using more power-hungry devices, the transformer had started struggling during peak usage times. Rocky Mountain Electric had told the HOA that upgrading the infrastructure would cost nearly $200,000, and that the HOA or the residents would need to foot part of that bill. That was where I came in. I had worked as an electrical engineer for 20 years before semi-retiring at age 45. When I moved to Pinewood Heights 3 years ago, I immediately saw the power problem. My solution was elegant. Install a massive solar array that would not only power my home but also feed significant excess power directly into the neighborhood grid. I approached Rocky Mountain Electric with a proposal, and after months of negotiations, we worked out an arrangement. I would supply power to the neighborhood, reducing the strain on the aging transformer, and they would pay me a premium rate for the electricity I generated. The system had been operational for 18 months, and it had worked beautifully. During the day, my panels generated enough power to supply roughly half the neighborhood's needs. Rocky Mountain Electric loved it because it solved their infrastructure problem without requiring a massive capital investment. I loved it because I was making about $3,000 a month from the power company, and my electricity bill was essentially zero. But there was one thing that Brenda Carmichael did not know. When I had set up the system, I had installed it with a feature that was perfectly legal but perhaps not widely advertised. I could remotely shut down my power feed to the grid whenever I wanted. If my system went offline, the neighborhood would have to rely entirely on the power coming through that overworked transformer. During normal conditions, this would not be a problem. But right now, after a major snowstorm with everyone running their heaters on full blast, coffee makers brewing, and electric snow blowers running, the transformer would be pushed right to its limit. I went back inside and called my friend Marcus Chen, who worked as a district manager for Rocky Mountain Electric. "Hey, Yuri," he answered on the second ring. "How's everything looking after the storm? Your system holding up okay?" "System's fine," I said. "Well, the panels are covered in snow right now, so production is down, but everything should be back to normal once it melts off." "Yeah, I noticed the reduced output this morning," Marcus said. "The neighborhood transformer is running at about 85% capacity right now. Nothing critical, but we are keeping an eye on it." I figured it would be elevated. "Hey, Marcus, I have a question about my contract. If I need to take my system offline for maintenance, what's the notification requirement?" There was a pause. "For planned maintenance, we prefer 24 hours notice. For emergency maintenance, you can shut down immediately, but you need to call us within 1 hour." "Why? Is something wrong?" "No, everything's fine," I said. "Just reviewing my options. I'll let you know if anything changes." After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and thought about my next move. Brenda had been a thorn in my side since she became HOA president 6 months ago. She had sent me violations for things like my trash, cans being visible from the street, having a garden gnome that was apparently not on the approved decorations list, and parking my truck in my driveway instead of my garage. Every violation had been either completely petty or had been overturned because she was misinterpreting the HOA rules. But this solar panel situation was different. She was now trying to force me to risk my safety by climbing on an icy roof just because she did not like how snow-covered panels looked. That crossed a line. I pulled up my laptop and logged into the monitoring system for my solar panels. The interface showed that my panels were currently producing only about 500 watts, roughly 1% of their capacity, due to the snow coverage. I could see the system status, battery charge levels for my home battery backup, and most importantly, the disconnect switch for the grid feed. My phone rang. It was my next-door neighbor, Frank Morrison. "Yuri, hey man," Frank said. "Did Brenda get to you this morning too?" "She did." "What did she want with you?" "She's demanding that I repaint my front door because the color has apparently faded and doesn't match the approved color scheme anymore." My door is 3 years old, Yuri. There's barely any fading at all. She's just making up problems. Frank and I had become friends over the past few years. He was a retired accountant who spent most of his time woodworking in his garage. He was one of the most reasonable guys in the neighborhood. She wants me to climb on my roof and clear snow off my solar panels, I told him. That's insane. That's got to be a safety issue. It is. But she doesn't care. She's threatened me with fines. Frank sighed. She's out of control, man. Half the neighborhood is getting violation notices for stupid stuff. Did you hear what she did to the Pattersons? No, what happened? They have that little free library box in their front yard, you know, the one shaped like a tiny house where people can borrow books. Brenda declared it an unapproved structure and demanded they remove it. When they refused, she actually had her husband come over and physically remove it while they were at work. That's theft, I said. That's what the Pattersons said. They called the police. Whole thing turned into a mess. Eventually, the cops made Brenda's husband return it, but Brenda is still claiming it's a violation. We talked for a few more minutes about Brenda's increasingly aggressive enforcement tactics. After I hung up, I decided to do some research. I pulled up the HOA bylaws and read through them carefully. The section Brenda had cited, Section 12.7, did indeed say that exterior home features needed to be maintained in an aesthetically pleasing manner. But it also included language about reasonable maintenance schedules and weather-related exceptions. Snow coverage after a blizzard definitely qualified as a weather-related exception. I spent the rest of the morning working from home. I ran a small consulting business, helping companies optimize their electrical systems. The work was engaging enough that I almost forgot about Brenda's ultimatum. At 3 in the afternoon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Brenda standing there with another woman I recognized as Helen Zimmerman, the HOA secretary. "Mr. Thompson," Brenda said formally, "I'm here to conduct a visual inspection of your property. As you can see, your solar panels are still covered in snow. It's now 3 p.m., which gives you only 2 hours to remedy this violation." Helen looked uncomfortable. She was a quiet woman in her 60s who mostly seemed to go along with whatever Brenda wanted. "Hi, Yuri," she said quietly. "Helen," I nodded. Then I turned to Brenda. "I've reviewed the HOA bylaws, and Section 12.7 includes provisions for weather-related exceptions. Snow coverage after a major storm falls under that exception." Brenda's face flushed red. "That's not how I interpret it." "Well, that's how it's written. If you want to fine me, go ahead, but I'll be contesting it, and I'll be filing a complaint with the board about your harassment." "Harassment?" Her voice rose. "I'm doing my job as HOA president. Just because you think you're special with your stupid solar panels doesn't mean you're above the rules." "I never said I was above the rules. I'm saying you're misapplying them." Brenda pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of my roof. "We'll see what the board says about this. And while I'm documenting violations, I notice your driveway has not been shoveled yet. That's Section 15.3. All driveways must be cleared within 12 hours of snowfall ending." I glanced at my driveway. She was right that it had not been shoveled yet, but the snow had only stopped 4 hours ago. "The snow stopped at 11 this morning. I have until 11 tonight to clear it." "The snow stopped at 6 a.m., Brenda insisted. "No, it didn't. I watched it snow until almost noon." We went back and forth for another minute until Helen quietly interrupted. "Actually, Brenda, I think Yuri is right. It was definitely still snowing when I drove past here at 10:30 this morning." Brenda shot Helen a look that could have melted the snow off my panels. "Fine. Whatever. But those solar panels are still a violation, and you'll be receiving a formal notice." After they left, I called my lawyer. His name was David Ramirez, and he had helped me with the contract negotiations with Rocky Mountain Electric. I explained the situation. "She can't force you to do unsafe work," David said immediately. "That's a non-starter. And you're right about the weather exception clause. If she tries to fine you, we'll fight it. But Yuri, let me give you some advice. HOA disputes can get really messy and expensive. Sometimes it's better to just play nice and avoid the conflict." "I've been playing nice for 6 months," I said. "She's not going to stop." "Then document everything. Every interaction, every violation notice, every communication. If this escalates, you'll want a paper trail." That evening, as I sat down for dinner, I got an email from the HOA. It was a formal violation notice with a $50 fine for failing to maintain my solar panels in an aesthetically pleasing manner. The notice gave me 3 days to clear the snow or face additional daily fines of $50. I forwarded the email to David, then sat back and thought about my options. The petty part of me wanted to teach Brenda a lesson. The practical part knew that escalating the conflict might not be worth it. Then I got another email, this one from Brenda directly. It was sent to the entire neighborhood mailing list. "Dear Pinewood Heights residents," it began. "As your HOA president, I'm committed to maintaining the high standards that make our neighborhood such a wonderful place to live. Unfortunately, some residents believe they're above the rules. I want to remind everyone that all HOA regulations apply equally to everyone, regardless of any special arrangements they may have with outside companies. Violations will be enforced consistently and fairly." The email did not mention me by name, but everyone would know who she was talking about. I was the only person in the neighborhood with solar panels. My phone started buzzing with text messages from neighbors. "Frank, what is she talking about with special arrangements?" Margaret Walsh from 3 houses down. "Is everything okay, Yuri? Brenda seems really angry about something." Even the Pattersons, whom I barely knew, sent a message. "If you need support dealing with the HOA, we're happy to back you up. Brenda's behavior is getting ridiculous." I spent an hour responding to messages, assuring everyone that everything was fine and that I was handling it. But with each message, I felt my frustration growing. Brenda was not just harassing me anymore. She was trying to turn the neighborhood against me. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the situation, running through different scenarios in my head. By morning, I had made my decision. The next day was Saturday. The weather forecast had been accurate, and the sun came out bright and strong. I watched through my window as the snow on my solar panels began to melt. By noon, about half of each panel was clear, and my system output had jumped to 15 kilowatts. By 2 p.m., the panels were completely clear, and I was back to full production. I took several photos documenting the natural melting process, then sent them to David with a note. "Violation resolved by natural weather conditions, as predicted. No unsafe roof climbing required." I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. On Monday morning, I received another email from Brenda. This one informed me that my original fine still stood because I had not cleared the panels within the 3-day deadline. The fact that they had cleared naturally was, according to her, irrelevant. I called David. "Can she do that?" Technically, she issued a fine and the violation was resolved, even if it resolved naturally. Whether the fine is valid is another question. "We can fight it, but we'll need to go through the HOA's dispute resolution process first." "Which means what?" "You'll need to submit a formal written appeal to the HOA board. They'll review it at their next meeting and make a decision. If they uphold the fine and you still disagree, you can take it to mediation or court." "How long does all that take?" "Months, potentially. and it could cost you a few thousand in legal fees. I hung up feeling frustrated. Brenda was betting that I would not want to go through the hassle and expense of fighting a $50 fine. She was probably right about most people, but I had fought bigger battles in my career, and I was not about to let her bully me. That afternoon, I was outside clearing some remaining snow from my walkway when a Rocky Mountain electric truck pulled up. Marcus got out, looking concerned. "Hey, Yuri, got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" "I got a call this morning from someone claiming to be your HOA president. She said there were safety concerns about your solar installation and demanded that we inspect it." I felt my jaw clench. There are no safety concerns. The system has been operating perfectly for 18 months. I know. I pulled up your monitoring data before I came over. Everything looks completely normal, but I'm required to follow up on any safety complaints. Can I take a look at your equipment? Of course. Marcus spent 20 minutes inspecting my inverters, checking connections, and reviewing the monitoring system. "Everything looks great," he finally said. "System is operating exactly as it should. I'll file a report saying there are no safety issues." "Thanks, Marcus. I appreciate you coming out." He hesitated. "Look, I probably shouldn't say this, but I've dealt with HOAs before. Some of them can get pretty nasty, especially when they don't like something. Your system is providing a real benefit to this neighborhood and to us. Don't let them push you around." After Marcus left, I sat down at my computer and wrote a detailed formal appeal of the fine. I cited the weather exception clause in the HOA bylaws, documented the timeline of when the snow fell and melted, included photos, and attached a statement from David about the safety issues involved in climbing on an icy roof. I sent it to the entire HOA board, not just Brenda. 2 days later, I got a response from Tom Hendricks, one of the other board members. He called me directly. "Yuri, I got your appeal," Tom said. He was a middle-aged guy who worked in IT and mostly seemed reasonable. "I want you to know that not everyone on the board agrees with how Brenda is handling this." "I appreciate that, Tom. The problem is, Brenda is really dug in on this. She sees your solar panels as some kind of personal affront. I don't fully understand it, but she's been on a warpath about them since before she became president." "So what happens with my appeal?" "We'll discuss it at the next board meeting, which is in 2 weeks. I can tell you right now that I'll be voting to waive the fine. Helen will probably vote however Brenda wants. The other 2 board members, Sarah and Jim, could go either way. Do I get to present my case at the meeting? You can request to address the board during the homeowner comments period. That's probably a good idea." Over the next 2 weeks, tensions in the neighborhood continued to escalate. Brenda sent out 3 more mass emails about the importance of HOA compliance. She started doing walking inspections of the neighborhood every few days, looking for violations. Suddenly, people were getting notices for things like weeds in their landscaping in the middle of winter, Christmas decorations being taken down too slowly, and minor paint chips on trim. The neighborhood Facebook group, which had previously been used mainly for lost pet alerts and recommendations for contractors, became a battleground. Some people defended Brenda, saying the HOA needed strong leadership to maintain property values. Others thought she had gone too far and was creating unnecessary conflict. I tried to stay out of the Facebook arguments, but Frank jumped in to defend me several times. So did the Pattersons and several other neighbors who had been on the receiving end of Brenda's enforcement crusade. 3 days before the HOA meeting, something interesting happened. I got a call from a reporter named Jennifer Wu from the Boulder Daily Camera newspaper. "Mr. Thompson, I'm doing a story about residential solar power in Boulder County, and I understand you have one of the larger residential installations in the area. Would you be willing to talk to me about your experience?" "Sure," I said. "How did you hear about my system?" "I reached out to Rocky Mountain Electric for information about residential solar in the area, and they mentioned your installation as an example of a successful independent power producer arrangement." We talked for about 30 minutes. I explained how the system worked, the economics of it, and the benefits it provided to the neighborhood. Towards the end of the conversation, Jennifer asked if I had faced any challenges with the installation. I hesitated. I did not want to make myself look like a victim, but I also thought the story should include the reality of dealing with HOA restrictions. "The HOA approval process was complicated," I said carefully. "There are a lot of regulations about exterior modifications, and not everyone was enthusiastic about solar panels in the neighborhood." "Are you still having issues with the HOA?" I decided to be honest. "Currently, there's a dispute about whether I should have been required to manually clear snow off the panels after the recent storm. The HOA president thinks snow-covered panels are aesthetically unpleasing." Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "That's interesting. Would you be willing to provide more details about that on the record?" "Let me think about it. Can I call you back?" After we hung up, I called David. "Should I talk to the press about this?" "That's up to you," David said. "It could help your case by bringing public attention to unreasonable HOA behavior, or it could make Brenda dig in even harder. It's a risk either way." I thought about it for the rest of the day. Finally, I decided that I had nothing to hide. I called Jennifer back and told her the full story, including Brenda's violation notices, the fine, and the false safety complaint to Rocky Mountain Electric. "This is great stuff," Jennifer said. "Would you be willing to let me sit in on the HOA meeting where you're appealing the fine?" "HOA meetings are supposed to be open to all homeowners," I said. "I don't see why not, but you might want to confirm with the board." The article came out 2 days before the HOA meeting. It was titled, "Solar Pioneer Faces HOA Backlash in Pinewood Heights." The article was fair and balanced, presenting both my perspective and including a statement from Brenda about the importance of HOA standards. But the overall tone was sympathetic to my situation, especially when it mentioned that my solar system was helping power the neighborhood. The article got a lot of attention on social media. Local environmental groups shared it, praising my solar installation. Several people in the comments section criticized Brenda and the HOA for creating obstacles to renewable energy. Brenda, predictably, was furious. She sent me an angry email accusing me of trying to embarrass the HOA and undermine her authority. She copied the entire board on the email. Tom Hendricks responded to the whole group. "Brenda, Yuri has every right to talk to the press about his experience." The article was factual and did not misrepresent anything. The night of the HOA meeting, I arrived at the community center 15 minutes early. The meetings were normally sparsely attended, usually just the 5 board members and maybe 2 or 3 homeowners. Tonight, the room was packed. At least 30 people were there, which was more than half the neighborhood. Jennifer Wu was there with a notebook. Frank had come to support me. So had the Pattersons, Margaret Walsh, and a bunch of other neighbors. Brenda looked shocked when she walked in and saw the crowd. She tried to compose herself as she took her seat at the head table with the other board members. "I call this meeting to order," she said, banging a gavel. "Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that HOA meetings are for residents only. Members of the press are not welcome." Jennifer raised her hand. "I'm a guest of Mr. Thompson, who is a homeowner here. Don't I have a right to attend as his guest?" Brenda's face reddened. "This is not a social event. Guests are allowed at the discretion of the board. Tom spoke up. Actually, Brenda, according to our bylaws, any homeowner can bring a reasonable number of guests to an open meeting. I don't see a problem with Miss Wu being here. Brenda looked like she wanted to argue, but she moved on. The meeting started with routine business, approving the minutes from the last meeting, discussing the budget for landscaping, and reviewing upcoming maintenance projects. Then we got to new business. We have an appeal of a violation fine to discuss, Brenda said stiffly. Mr. Thompson was fined $50 for failing to maintain his solar panels in accordance with HOA aesthetic standards. He has appealed this fine. I'd like to address the board during the homeowner comments period, I said. You can speak now, Tom said. I stood up and walked to the front of the room. I had prepared a short statement, and I kept it factual and calm. 2 weeks ago, after a major snowstorm, my solar panels were covered in snow. This is a normal and expected occurrence. The HOA president demanded that I climb onto my icy roof to manually clear the snow, claiming that snow-covered panels violated aesthetic standards. I refused because it was unsafe, and because the HOA bylaws include a weather exception clause. The snow melted naturally within 24 hours. Despite this, I was still fined. I believe this fine is unjustified and should be waived. Several neighbors applauded. Brenda glared at them. Mr. Thompson, the issue is not whether the snow eventually melted, Brenda said. The issue is that you refused to comply with a direct order from the HOA president. The issue is that you ordered me to do something unsafe and unreasonable, I countered. Tom raised his hand. I'd like to make a motion to waive the fine. The weather exception clause clearly applies in this case. I second the motion, said Sarah Kim, one of the other board members. Discussion, Tom asked. Brenda jumped in. I strongly oppose this motion. If we start making exceptions to our rules, the entire system breaks down. Mr. Thompson's solar panels have been a problem since day one. They're ugly, they lower property values, and he acts like he's some kind of special case because he has some deal with the power company. That's not fair, Frank called out from the audience. Yuri's panels don't affect property values at all, and his deal with the power company benefits all of us. Mr. Morrison, you're out of order, Brenda snapped. Let him speak, Tom said. This is an open meeting. Frank stood up. I just want to say that I live right next door to Yuri. His solar panels don't bother me at all, and I think most people here appreciate what he's done. His system helps keep our power reliable and our costs down. Several other people voiced their agreement. Margaret Walsh stood up and talked about how she had been considering solar panels herself, but was now worried about HOA retaliation. One of the Pattersons talked about Brenda's pattern of aggressive enforcement. The meeting was spiraling out of Brenda's control. Her face was getting redder by the minute. That's enough, she finally shouted. We're here to discuss one specific violation, not to air everyone's grievances about HOA enforcement. Actually, Tom said calmly, I think these comments are relevant. They speak to a pattern of unreasonable enforcement. I call the question on my motion to waive the fine. The board voted. Tom and Sarah voted to waive the fine. Jim Brennan, a quiet guy who usually sided with Brenda, surprised everyone by also voting to waive it. Helen voted no. Brenda, as president, voted last. I vote no, she said firmly, but the motion carries 3-2. The fine is waived. There was applause from the audience. I thanked the board and returned to my seat, but Brenda was not done. While we're on the subject of Mr. Thompson's solar panels, I'd like to propose a new rule for the board to consider. Going forward, all solar panel installations should be required to have snow removal equipment installed. such as heating elements or automatic clearing systems, to ensure they remain clear year-round. That would add thousands of dollars to the cost of any solar installation, I said immediately. It would effectively ban solar panels in the neighborhood. That's not my intention, Brenda said, though her slight smile suggested otherwise. I'm simply trying to ensure that future installations don't create the same aesthetic issues we've had with yours. I'd like to table that discussion for another meeting, Tom said. We should research the costs and implications before making any decisions. The rest of the meeting proceeded with more routine business, but the tension in the room never fully dissipated. After the meeting ended, several neighbors came up to congratulate me and express their support. Jennifer asked me a few follow-up questions for her article. As I was leaving, Brenda intercepted me in the parking lot. "You think you've won," she said quietly, her voice shaking with anger. "But this isn't over. I will find a way to get those ugly panels off your roof." "Why are you so obsessed with my solar panels?" I asked. "They're not hurting anyone. They're actually helping the neighborhood." "Because they're an eyesore, and because people like you think you can do whatever you want without consequences. This neighborhood has standards, and I'm going to enforce them." She walked away before I could respond. I stood there in the cold parking lot, watching her get into her Mercedes SUV. Something about her reaction felt personal in a way that went beyond just HOA enforcement. When I got home, I poured myself a whiskey and sat down to decompress. The meeting had gone well, but Brenda's threat worried me. She was clearly not going to let this go. Over the next few weeks, Brenda continued her aggressive enforcement campaign across the neighborhood. She seemed to be taking out her frustration about the meeting on everyone. Violation notices went out for increasingly trivial issues. People started talking about recalling her as president, but the HOA bylaws made that process extremely difficult. Then, in early February, something happened that changed everything. I was working in my home office when my power monitoring system alerted me to an anomaly. My solar panels were producing normally, but I was seeing an unusual voltage fluctuation in the grid feed. I pulled up the detailed monitoring screen and saw that the neighborhood transformer was running hot, nearly 95% of capacity. That was strange. It was the middle of the day on a weekday. Most people were at work, and power usage should have been relatively low. I called Marcus at Rocky Mountain Electric. "Yeah, we're seeing it too," Marcus said. "We're trying to figure out what's causing the elevated load. It's like someone in the neighborhood is running a massive piece of equipment. Any guesses what it could be?" "Not yet. We might need to send a crew out to investigate. In the meantime, your system is really helping. Without your feed, that transformer would probably already be overloaded." The situation continued for the rest of the day. By evening, Marcus called me back. "We found the problem," he said. "Remember your HOA president, Brenda Carmichael?" "Unfortunately, yes. What about her?" "She apparently just installed a heated driveway system. It's drawing about 25 kilowatts continuously. That's more power than 3 normal houses combined." I felt a surge of anger. She's been harassing me about my solar panels supposedly being a problem, and now she's installed something that's actually straining the grid, pretty much. And here's the thing. She didn't get any permits for the installation. The contractor she used didn't pull an electrical permit, which means the work wasn't inspected. That's a code violation, and it's potentially dangerous. What happens now? We're going to send her a letter requiring her to get proper permits and an inspection. If the installation isn't up to code, she'll need to fix it or shut it down. The next day, the story got even more interesting. It turned out that Brenda's heated driveway was not just unpermitted, it was also against HOA rules. One of the neighbors pulled out the bylaws and found a section that prohibited exterior heating systems for aesthetic and environmental reasons. The rule had been passed years ago to prevent people from melting snow off their roofs with heating cables because it created ice dams and drainage problems. Someone, I suspect Frank, but I never confirmed it, sent an anonymous complaint to the HOA board about Brenda's violation of this rule. The irony was delicious. Brenda had spent months aggressively enforcing every minor HOA rule, and now she was in violation of a major one. At the next HOA board meeting, Brenda tried to argue that the rule about heating systems did not apply to driveways, only to roofs. Tom read the rule aloud. It clearly said exterior heating systems without any limitations. "This is ridiculous," Brenda said. "That rule was meant to address a specific problem with roof heating cables. It was never intended to prevent heated driveways." "The rule says what it says," Tom replied. "And even if we wanted to make an exception, there's still the issue of the unpermitted electrical work and the strain on the neighborhood transformer." The board voted to fine Brenda $50 for the HOA violation and require her to either get proper permits or remove the system. The vote was 4-1, with only Helen voting no. Brenda's face went through several shades of red during the vote. After the meeting, she submitted her resignation as HOA president, effective immediately. "I can't work with a board that doesn't support me," she wrote in her resignation email. "I've tried to maintain standards in this neighborhood, but certain residents have made that impossible. I wish you all the best in dealing with the chaos that will inevitably follow." Tom Hendricks was elected interim president at an emergency board meeting a few days later. One of his first acts was to suspend all pending violation notices so the board could review enforcement procedures. "We need to get back to reasonable, common-sense enforcement," Tom said. "The HOA exists to maintain the neighborhood and protect property values, not to create conflict over petty issues. I thought that would be the end of the drama, but I was wrong." About a week after Brenda resigned, I got a call from Marcus at Rocky Mountain Electric. "Yuri, we have a problem. Brenda Carmichael has filed a formal complaint with the Public Utilities Commission claiming that your solar installation is unsafe and that we're negligent for allowing it to operate." "That's insane. Your engineers have inspected my system multiple times. It's completely safe." "I know. We're going to fight the complaint, but there's going to be a hearing. You'll probably need to testify." "Fine. I've got documentation of everything." The PUC hearing was scheduled for March. In the meantime, Brenda apparently decided to escalate things further. She hired a lawyer and sent a letter to the HOA threatening to sue them for selectively enforcing rules. Her argument was that if her heated driveway was prohibited, then my solar panels should be too, because both were exterior modifications that affected the appearance of the property. The HOA's lawyer sent back a letter explaining that my solar panels had been properly approved through the architectural modification process before installation, while her heated driveway had not. The cases were not comparable. Brenda was not satisfied with that answer. In early March, about a week before the PUC hearing, I came home to find a surveyor on my property. He was measuring my roof line and taking photos. "Excuse me, what are you doing?" I asked. "I'm conducting a survey for Mrs. Carmichael," he said. "She's claiming that your solar panel installation extends beyond your property line." I almost laughed. My house sat in the middle of a half-acre lot. There was no way my solar panels came anywhere close to the property line. "I think you'll find that's not the case." He finished his measurements and left. A few days later, I got a letter from Brenda's lawyer claiming that my solar panel array created shade encroachment onto her property, reducing her property value and violating her rights. This was completely absurd. Brenda's house was 2 houses down from mine and on the opposite side of the street. My panels were on my south-facing roof and could not possibly cast shadows on her property. I forwarded the letter to David. "This is harassment at this point," he said. "I think we need to consider filing a countersuit." Before we could do that, the situation took another turn. I got a call from a detective with the Boulder County Sheriff's Office. "Mr. Thompson, this is Detective Ray Morrison. I'd like to ask you some questions about your solar panel installation. Can we meet?" My heart sank. "What's this about?" "I'd rather discuss it in person. Can you come down to the station, or would you prefer I come to your house?" "I'll come to the station." An hour later, I was sitting in an interview room at the sheriff's office with David beside me. Detective Morrison was a middle-aged guy with graying hair and a serious expression. "Mr. Thompson, we've received a complaint alleging that you committed fraud in your dealings with Rocky Mountain Electric regarding your solar panel installation. The complaint claims that you misrepresented the capabilities of your system in order to secure a favorable contract." I felt a flash of anger. "That's completely false. Who made this complaint?" "I can't reveal that right now. Can you walk me through how you set up your agreement with Rocky Mountain Electric?" With David's guidance, I explained the entire process. I provided copies of my contract, emails with Rocky Mountain Electric engineers, inspection reports, and performance data showing that my system had consistently met or exceeded all specifications. Detective Morrison reviewed the documents carefully. After about an hour, he closed his notebook. "Mr. Thompson, based on what you've shown me, I don't see any evidence of fraud. Your contract is straightforward and your system performs as advertised. I'll be closing this complaint." "Can you tell me now who filed it?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Brenda Carmichael. She claimed you had deceived the power company and that your system was dangerous." "She's been harassing me for months," I said. "This is just the latest in a series of false complaints." "I understand. For what it's worth, filing a false police report is itself a crime. If you want to pursue charges against her, you have that option." I thought about it. "Not right now. I just want this to be over." The PUC hearing happened the following week. It was held in a conference room at the Public Utilities Commission office in Denver. Present were representatives from Rocky Mountain Electric, Brenda and her lawyer, myself and David, and a 3-person panel from the PUC. Brenda's lawyer argued that my solar installation created safety risks and reliability issues for the neighborhood power grid. He presented an expert witness, an engineer who had never actually inspected my system, who testified that independent power producer arrangements with residential systems were inherently problematic. Then, it was our turn. Marcus testified about Rocky Mountain Electric's thorough vetting process for my installation. He presented data showing that my system had improved grid stability in the neighborhood and had operated flawlessly for nearly 2 years. Another engineer from the power company walked through the safety features and monitoring systems that made the installation safe. I testified about my background as an electrical engineer and the care I had taken to design and install a safe, reliable system. The hearing lasted about 4 hours. At the end, the PUC panel deliberated for 30 minutes before returning with their decision. "We find no evidence of safety concerns with Mr. Thompson's solar installation," the chairwoman said. "The system appears to be properly designed, installed, and monitored. The complaint is dismissed." Brenda's lawyer immediately stood up. "We'd like to request a formal investigation into Rocky Mountain Electric's procedures for approving independent power producers. "You can file a separate complaint about that if you wish," the chairwoman said, "but this hearing is concluded." As we left the building, Brenda intercepted me in the lobby. "You think you've won," she hissed, "but I'm not done. I'll find a way to get rid of those panels." "Brenda, why are you doing this?" I asked, genuinely curious. "What did I ever do to you?" "You represent everything that's wrong with this world," she said. "People who think they're better than everyone else, who think the rules don't apply to them. I'm going to prove that you're not special." She stormed off. David and I stood there for a moment. "She's unhinged," David said. "I think we need to get a restraining order." Over the next few weeks, we worked on preparing a harassment case against Brenda. We documented every false complaint, every baseless accusation, every threatening communication. David filed for a restraining order requiring Brenda to stay away from me and my property and to stop filing false complaints. The hearing for the restraining order was scheduled for mid-April. In the meantime, Brenda continued her campaign. She filed a complaint with the Better Business Bureau against Rocky Mountain Electric. She wrote letters to the Boulder County commissioners arguing that residential solar should be more heavily regulated. She even showed up at a city council meeting to speak during public comments about the dangers of solar panels. The local media started picking up on the story. Jennifer Wu wrote a follow-up article about Brenda's campaign against my solar installation. The article painted her as an anti-renewable energy activist, which brought criticism from environmental groups. Then, one morning in early April, something happened that I had not expected. I was checking my solar panel monitoring system when I noticed that someone had accessed the remote monitoring interface using credentials that were not mine. The access had happened at 3 in the morning. I immediately called the monitoring system company's security line. They confirmed that someone had logged in using what appeared to be hacked credentials. "What could they do with access to the monitoring system?" I asked. "They can see your system performance data, but they can't control anything. The actual system controls are on a separate secured network that requires physical access to the equipment." I reported the hacking attempt to Detective Morrison. He took it seriously this time. "This is a crime," he said. "Computer system intrusion. Do you have any idea who might have done this?" "I have a suspicion, but no proof. Let me guess. Brenda Carmichael. She's been trying to find dirt on my system for months. Access to the monitoring data might let her claim there were performance issues or safety problems." The sheriff's office opened an investigation. They subpoenaed the monitoring company's logs and started tracing the IP address of the unauthorized access. A week later, Detective Morrison called me with an update. We traced the hacking attempt. It came from an IP address registered to Brenda Carmichael's home. So she definitely did it. Someone using her internet connection did it. We're going to bring her in for questioning. 2 days later, Brenda was arrested and charged with unauthorized computer access, a felony in Colorado. According to Detective Morrison, when they questioned her, she initially denied it but then admitted that she had hired someone online to hack into my monitoring system. She claimed she was just trying to find evidence that my system was dangerous. The person she hired was actually an undercover officer working on a different case, Detective Morrison told me. She literally tried to hire a cop to commit a crime. It would be funny if it wasn't so serious. Brenda was released on bond, but the charges were significant. Her lawyer started trying to negotiate a plea deal. The restraining order hearing happened a few days after Brenda's arrest. With the criminal charges pending, the judge granted the restraining order without much argument from Brenda's lawyer. "Mrs. Carmichael, you are to have no contact with Mr. Thompson," the judge said sternly. No direct contact, no indirect contact, no communications of any kind. You are not to go within 100 yards of his property. You are not to file any further complaints or legal actions against him without first getting approval from this court. Do you understand? Brenda nodded silently. She looked defeated for the first time since I had known her. As spring turned to summer, things finally started to calm down. Brenda pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of computer trespass, a misdemeanor. She was sentenced to 1 year of probation, a $5,000 fine, and ordered to pay restitution for my legal fees related to the hacking. Tom Hendricks did a good job as HOA president. He instituted new procedures for issuing violations, including a requirement that all violations be reviewed by at least 2 board members before being sent out. He also created an appeals process that did not require expensive lawyers. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal. Violation notices became rare and reasonable. People stopped arguing on Facebook. The Pattersons put their little free library back in their front yard, and nobody complained. My solar panels continued to operate perfectly, generating clean power and helping to supply the neighborhood grid. Rocky Mountain Electric was so happy with the arrangement that they asked me to consult on similar projects in other communities. In August, I got an unexpected visitor. Brenda Carmichael came to my door. She looked different, tired, and older somehow. "I know I'm not supposed to be here," she said. "But I wanted to apologize. My lawyer said I shouldn't, but I felt like I needed to." I was too surprised to speak for a moment. "Okay. I was wrong about everything," she continued. "The solar panels, the enforcement, all of it. I let my need for control turn me into someone I don't recognize. I've been going to therapy, trying to understand why I acted that way. My therapist thinks I have some issues with control and authority that go back to my childhood." "I appreciate you saying that," I said, "but why did you focus so much on my solar panels specifically?" She was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, my ex-husband was an environmental engineer. He was obsessed with renewable energy and sustainability. When he left me for a younger woman 2 years ago, I think I started associating all that stuff with him. When you installed your panels, it was like he was there in the neighborhood, reminding me of my failure. I know that's not rational. That's why I'm in therapy." I did not know what to say. I had spent months thinking of Brenda as a villain, a Karen who got joy from making other people miserable. Learning that her behavior came from a place of pain and unresolved trauma made her seem human in a way I had not expected. "I hope the therapy helps," I finally said. "Me too. I'm also moving. I put my house on the market last month. I think a fresh start somewhere else would be good for me." "I'm sorry for everything I put you through." She left, and I watched her walk back to her car. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that the conflict was over, satisfaction that justice had been served, but also a bit of sadness for someone who had been so unhappy that she had lashed out at everyone around her. A few weeks later, I saw a sold sign go up in front of Brenda's house. She moved out in September, and a young couple with 2 kids moved in. They introduced themselves, admired my solar panels, and asked questions about whether they could install their own. Tom served out the rest of Brenda's term as HOA president, then decided not to run for re-election. A retired school teacher named Doris Jenkins was elected the new president. Her campaign platform was common sense and community, and she delivered on it. Life in Pinewood Heights became peaceful. My solar panels kept humming along, generating power day after day. Every month I got a check from Rocky Mountain Electric for the excess power I supplied to the grid. Every month I looked at my power bill and saw that I owed nothing. On sunny days, I would sometimes go outside and look up at those panels and think about everything that had happened. The conflict with Brenda had been stressful and expensive, but it had also brought the neighborhood together in unexpected ways. People who barely knew each other before had become allies and friends. The HOA had reformed its procedures and become more reasonable. And my solar installation, which had been the source of so much controversy, had proven its worth many times over. One afternoon in October, as the autumn sun hung low in the sky, I was raking leaves when Frank came over. "Hey man, you got a minute?" he asked. "Sure, what's up?" "I've been thinking about installing solar panels myself. After watching your system work for 2 years and seeing how much money you're saving, it just makes sense. Plus, with Brenda gone, I'm not worried about HOA drama." I smiled. "I'd be happy to help you out. Let me give you the contact information for the installer I used." Over the next few months, Frank installed his own solar array. So did Margaret Walsh and 2 other neighbors. Tom Hendricks started looking into whether the HOA could install a community solar system for the common areas. The neighborhood that had nearly torn itself apart over my solar panels was turning into a showcase for renewable energy. Every installation reduced the strain on the aging transformer, making the whole neighborhood's power more reliable. Property values went up as more buyers became interested in the area because of the solar installations. By the time winter rolled around again and we got our first major snowstorm, things had come full circle. I stood at my window watching the snow accumulate on my panels, knowing that it would melt off naturally in a day or two, and that nobody was going to complain about it. That evening, as I sat by my fireplace with a glass of wine, I thought about what I had learned from the whole experience. HOAs could be forces for good or for bad depending on who was running them and how they applied the rules. Solar panels, despite what some people thought, could be beautiful and beneficial. And sometimes the people who seemed like villains were just struggling with their own demons. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus at Rocky Mountain Electric. "Wanted to let you know that your system just hit a milestone. You've generated 100,000 kilowatt hours since installation. That's enough to power the average American home for nearly 10 years. Thanks for being a pioneer in residential solar." I smiled and texted back a thank you. Then I pulled up my power monitoring app and watched the data scroll across the screen. Even at night, my battery backup system was feeding power back to the neighborhood, keeping the lights on, the heaters running, and the streetlights glowing. Somewhere 2 houses down, in the house that used to be Brenda's, the new family was probably sitting down to dinner. Their lights were burning bright, powered in part by my solar panels. The irony was not lost on me. The person who had fought hardest against my installation would have been receiving power from it every single day if she had just let it go. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I had fought for what I believed in, stood up to intimidation and harassment, and come out the other side. My solar panels would keep generating clean power for decades to come, long after anyone remembered the drama they had caused. And every time I got a check from Rocky Mountain Electric, every time I saw my electric bill come in at $0, every time a neighbor asked me about installing their own panels, I was reminded that doing the right thing, even when it was difficult, was always worth it in the end. The neighborhood of Pinewood Heights had learned an important lesson. Progress and tradition did not have to be enemies. Innovation and community standards could coexist, and sometimes the things that seemed threatening at first turned out to be the best things that ever happened. My solar panels had survived the snow, survived the HOA, and survived Karen. Now they were just doing what they were designed to do, quietly, efficiently, reliably converting sunlight into electricity, powering homes, and proving that the future of energy was bright.